Am I the asshole for exposing my ex-fiance's mistress 12 years later? 12 years ago, I, 36 female, was engaged and about to get married to Carl. Everything in my life seemed perfect until I found out my fiance was having an affair with the new hire of his job called Camilla. 20 female. Both of them were in serious relationships. I broke off the engagement with Carl as soon as I found out and told Camilla's boyfriend about the cheating. Well, it was hard for me, but I moved on after months of therapy and the help of my friends and family. Now I am married to Henry, 41 male, my amazing husband and father of our 4 children. 9 female, 7 male, 4 male, and 4 female. I moved to the other side of the country years ago, and I never thought about my ex-fiance or the cheating again. My husband works in a law firm. Last year, they hired a new lawyer, Daniel, 34 male, who moved with his family to live in our area. He and my husband became very good friends, as they have similar interests and personalities. Henry asked me to invite Daniel's family to our house to help adjust with the new city and job. When Daniel came to my house for a play date with our kids, his kids are 4 and 2, he introduced us to his wife, Cam. Well, Cam was Camilla. I really didn't know how to react when I recognized her. I had the impression that she also recognized me. Our husbands didn't understand why everything seemed so tense, and we pretended not to know each other and made failed attempts of small talk. After an hour, Cam made up an excuse and her family left. Henry noticed my behavior and asked me what was happening. I told him everything. He already knew about my past with Carl and the affair. Later that day, I received a text from Camilla begging me not to tell Daniel about our past. I read the message and didn't reply, but I decided not to say anything and mind my business. This was not my problem anymore. After a week of silence, Daniel shows up to our doorstep looking very agitated. He talked to my husband alone, and after, Henry asked me to tell Daniel my version of everything. Like my husband, Daniel realized something weird happened on our meeting and spent the week trying to get answers from his wife. She refused to tell him what happened and then tried to say I was her ex-boyfriend's side chick and that's why we were so tense. Daniel didn't buy her story and they had a massive fight. After the fight, he realized I was the one that could tell him the truth. And I did tell him everything after he asked. I even showed him the text message Camilla sent me. I didn't feel the need to sugarcoat things since Camilla was out there telling lies about me. Daniel was in complete shock because cheating is a trigger for him. His father cheated on his mom for years and left the family for his mistress, which made him hate cheaters. Camilla knew about this since their first date. Daniel left our house looking defeated, and in the same day I received a call from Camilla accusing me of being a revengeful bitch. She said I was trying to destroy her life. I don't think I was wrong for telling the truth, but this happened last year and I received calls and random messages from people close to Camilla saying I'm the asshole for exposing Camilla's past to her husband. This is not a fake story. The only thing that's fake are the names. I'm not AI either. Second, I don't think cheaters must be punished forever. While I would probably never want to be close friends with Camilla, after the initial shock, I would have no issues being civil with her. I don't think she deserves to live through hell because she was awful years ago. I also don't think she was the worst person. Carl definitely was. He was the one who was about to marry me, but she was a willing part of the affair and she knew me from their office. Also, everybody there knew Carl was living with me and we were engaged. Third, Camilla got my number from Daniel's phone. I have a pretty uncommon last name, and my name is not popular either. Daniel got my number from me. Henry gave me his contact to set up a dinner date to introduce our families. I texted him. We already have met sometimes on our office and at my house when he came by with Henry. Daniel texted me back about setting up our plans for the kids' play date, and that's that. My husband didn't give Camilla my number. At the time all of this happened, my husband had just seen her once while at the office with Daniel. The fact that Camilla has access to her husband's phone is not weird to me. Her actions were. The update. Daniel and Camilla are not divorced. After leaving our house, Daniel stayed at a hotel for a while. Then he got back to his house and they started doing couples therapy. The harassment through calls and texts lasted over a month. Henry was about to send a cease and desist when he decided to talk to Daniel about this. Daniel handled it. What I know through Henry is that most of Camilla's flying monkeys didn't know the full story, and when Daniel set things straight, they stopped. Camilla emailed me months after apologizing. I accepted her apology, but we are not close, and I don't feel like her words were genuine. Most likely, she wants to save her marriage. Talking about their marriage, Daniel and I talked some months after this at a party in my house, and I told him that I felt terrible for my part on their marital problems, and he reassured me. Daniel said that they were already having issues before we met. Seems like she wasn't happy about moving here and leaving her family on the other side of the country. Also, they were having money problems because their old state had a higher cost of living since Camilla left work after she got pregnant with their second child, they had less money and cutting costs on their lifestyle was making them fight. The move to our state made sense because it was a better position with a good raise. I don't know much else about it, just that recently Henry told me that Daniel was depressed after a big fight they had about Thanksgiving. Camilla wanted to travel to their old state to stay with her family, and Daniel wanted to visit his mother that lives closer. Everybody in the office knows about their fight since Daniel asked to stay at a coworker's place. Daniel told Henry directly that he would start divorce proceedings because of their last fight. Camilla was talking about taking the kids and moving back closer to her parents. He said that she will not have full custody of his kids. That's basically all I know, and I don't really know if Daniel will go through with divorce.
A girl named Hayden emailed me. She was like, I have a spooky, scary story time about renting an Airbnb with my boyfriend last Christmas for a week, and it was the most terrifying experience I've ever had in my life. I'm so excited for this story. It's so good, but I'm excited because I'm in the Smoky Mountains right now, and I've been saving the story for this trip. So Hayden and her boyfriend decided they were going to go away for Christmas. They were going to get a mountain cabin for the week of Christmas because they couldn't decide on whose family to go to. They had not been together that long, but also kind of together long. So it was just easier if they just did the Christmas themselves and then dealt with it this year. So they booked this 1 week stay at a cabin. It has great reviews. Hayden reads the reviews before she books it. Great reviews, super host status. The only thing that a lot of the reviews said was that the driveway was super steep, so to make sure you had 4-wheel drive. So Hayden's like, no problem. Her boyfriend drove a truck, whatever. They book it. So when they're driving to the cabin the first day, they're winding up these mountain roads, and they come across a black dog in the middle of the road. It's a huge sheepdog looking dog. It's not mad and it looks well taken care of, and it's just stopped in the middle of the road and it's staring at them, and they can't pass because it's a narrow road. So they just wait. The dog runs into the woods. They're like, okay, weird, but whatever. There's not really any other houses as they pull up to this alone cabin. So they get there, they check it out. It's a nice place, super clean. Everything is in its place as photographed. So she's just being a little nosy, checking out the closets, seeing where the washer and dryer's at. And she tries this one door off the main hallway, off the living room, leading back to the bedrooms. It was a 1-story house. So she tries this door and it's locked, and she's like, okay, whatever. The host keeps probably cleaning supplies in here. She doesn't think anything of it. They're just hanging out. They have a bottle of gin and they have a bottle of something else. I forgot what she said. Later that night, Hayden wakes up because she hears whispering, and she's like, hey, do you hear that? She wakes up her boyfriend, and he's like, yeah, who is that? And so they look out the window. They don't see anything, but they're just somebody is whispering. And so they go out to the living room, make sure the TV's off, everything's off. They get back in bed, whispering stops. Hayden woke up pretty early. She said there was a time change from where she lived, and so she was just up a little bit earlier than she was used to. The sun was coming up. It was just rising, so pretty early. She's laying in bed for a little while, just listening to the quiet, and she hears something rustling outside the window. So she's like, oh, there's an animal out there. So she wakes up, she opens the blinds and peeks out, and she can't see anything. So she's like, okay, weird, whatever. She goes out to the kitchen and makes some coffee, and she sees that the gin bottle is empty. Her and her boyfriend had gone to bed at the same time, and she said that they had maybe 4 drinks out of that bottle. So when he woke up later, she was like, oh, did you wake up last night and have some more drinks without me? Just kind of playing around. She's like, you finished the bottle? And he was like, no, I didn't. And she was like, no, you did. And she said it really bothered her because she thought he was lying about being a closet alcoholic or something. But later on, they're downtown in the cute little shop area, and he brings it up to her because she orders a drink at a bar that they're at, and he's like, hey, I think we should talk about your drinking. I know that you finished that bottle of gin and you didn't want to tell me, and you try to make it seem like I did it, but I know that you did it. And she was like, I didn't finish that bottle. But whatever, they're there. So they have a drink together, they have dinner, they go back to their Airbnb, and they were not fighting, but she said the energy was off. So that night, pretty soon after they got back to the Airbnb, they go to bed pretty early because they just didn't really want to hang out with each other. That night, she wakes up to a noise that sounds like a car door being slammed. And she looks next to her boyfriend's there, so she's like, what is going on? So she looks out through the blinds, and she sees headlights in the driveway. So she wakes her boyfriend. She's like, somebody's here. And he's like, what do you mean? And she's like, look outside the window. There's a car out there. And so he looks, and he's like, this is weird, because the cabin that they were renting was not by any other cabin. So at first, her boyfriend is trying to convince her, okay, well, maybe it's just somebody that's turned around on these mountain roads. They're trying to go back down. They're just trying to figure out where they are. And a lot of people don't have service. So Hayden goes out to the living room to look out the living room window so she can maybe get a plate or something in case anything happens. And she notices that now, in the time it took her to walk from the bedroom to the living room, they have flashed their brights on. So now their whole living room is lit up with these brights. Side note for anyone who saw the video that I posted yesterday about being in the Smoky Mountains, this is the story that I was reading when those brights were behind me. That's why I freaked out. Anyway, floodlights coming through the living room window. Her boyfriend comes out. He's like, what is going on? He's like, I'm gonna call the cops. So he steps outside. He's like, hey, I'm gonna call the cops. Like, what are you doing out here? And he's telling Hayden, like, hey, call the cops. So she calls, and as like he's yelling at this car, it like backs down the driveway and takes off. The last night Hayden was there, she woke up to someone whispering her name. And so she was like, oh, that was a really vivid dream. But then she wakes up and she hears them whisper Hayden again. And she jumps up, sits up in bed. She looks out the window, there's nobody there. So she like smacks her boyfriend. She's like, get up, somebody's here. They call the cops again because they're convinced like someone is on the property. Cops come, can't find anything. They take the report, and Hayden has had enough. She messages the host. The host was like super nice, refunded her the rest of the nights, the 4 nights that they didn't stay. And Hayden leaves, and she says like at this point, she's convinced that there was somebody else in that Airbnb. Now, she said it was a standalone property, but the only thing that she keeps thinking of is that locked room. She said she scoured the reviews. There was nothing else about hearing whispering or headlights or anything like that. She said she's curious to what you guys think because it's been a year, but she still said she thinks about it and she will never come back to the mountains.
Have a creepy story time, but I have a feeling this is going to be a long one. I tried to record it all in one video earlier and I was not successful. So this boy and girl meet on a night out and they get on really well, but at the end of the night he turns around and says, actually only out because this is my farewell drink. I'm actually going to be moving to a random destination, little island off the coast of Scotland, which is not well connected at all, and so I probably will never see you again. She's devastated in her drunken state and she says, take my number, I want to keep texting you regardless of whether this works or it doesn't. They continue to exchange text messages for the next 2 to 3 months, and originally he said, maybe when I get myself settled in this place I can eventually have you round. And this place is desolate. It's not easy to get to. It's not well connected. There's barely anybody that actually lives on this island. And to top it off, the house that he's living in is like a 500-year-old house that he's going to be working on. He is essentially camping and he just doesn't feel like it's the sort of place that he wants to bring a lady. So eventually, because of this, the conversation between the two just kind of fizzles out. A full year passes. She has a boyfriend. She goes traveling. She gets on with her life, but she never forgets about this one guy. Eventually she breaks up with the boyfriend, and one night when she's had a drink she decides to text him. She texts him and she tells him, I can't stop thinking about you. It's been a year and I've only met you once. He texts her back and he says same. I can't stop thinking about you and I wish we'd have made it work, but we didn't. What can we do now? And she does what women do and she made it happen. She books herself to get to this far-flung place. And as she was realising pretty soon after she leaves the UK that he wasn't lying, this place is pretty much in the middle of nowhere, and it starts to scare her a little bit. But then she sees him and all of a sudden she feels much better about the entire situation. He makes her feel comfortable and he is exactly the person that she remembers on that night out in Essex. Here's where it gets creepy. One night she wakes up in the middle of the night and the house is already creepy because it's 500 years old and it's falling down, and she sees the man, her man, standing by the door of the bedroom, wiggling the lock on the door, wiggling it, frantically wiggling the lock. And she sits bolt upright thinking that they're being broken into, and she's like, what's going on? Tell me everything's okay. This man turns, he looks at her and his eyes are wide with fear, but he doesn't look at her, he looks through her as though he is in a daze, in a trance. She's thinking, what the fuck? Get back into this bed and tell me everything's okay. But he doesn't speak to her. No, he just carries on staring at her, staring through her. And then it clicks. He's sleepwalking. So she gets up, puts him back in bed. But when she turns to look at him, his eyes are still wide open, unblinking, staring straight at her. The next morning when she wakes up, she makes a joke about the fact that he was sleepwalking. And he says, I have never sleepwalked before. Maybe you were in a dream because I've never been told I sleepwalk. Like, that would be very unusual. The pair of them laugh it off, but there is something about how he was behaving that just doesn't sit right with her. And then one day he is shirtless but in daylight, and she hasn't seen him shirtless in daylight before, and she starts to notice that his body is covered in bruises, almost like he's been paintballing. Big bruises. In fact, some of the bruises on his back almost look like bite marks. Now at this point, I would say she's starting to question her decision to come and see this man who she barely knows in the middle of nowhere. Starts to question if he could possibly be seeing someone else, and maybe the bruises were from something else, if you know what I mean. So she decides to question him, and she doesn't like what she's told. He kind of seizes up, almost like he couldn't think of a lie quick enough, and he tells her that maybe he done it at work. This man is a builder. So she's thinking, well, unless you fell off a ladder onto another woman's mouth, I don't really understand how that would happen. After she confronts him, everything between them just kind of goes sour. She doesn't like his energy, he obviously doesn't like her energy, and it's like there is a complete disconnect. The entire time that she's been there, he has been working, and he would go and collect like building materials from his uncle's house and bring them back, and she would go with him in the car each time. But this time she decides she's not going to do it, and she has a plan. Her plan is, when he's out, she has seen where he keeps his iPad, and she's going to break into that iPad, she's going to have a look through, and she's going to find her own answers, and then she can be done with it, she can leave. Goes through that iPad, and this man is basically a saint. There is no dating apps, there's no emails, there's no text messages. But then she decides to go through his camera roll, and it is there that she finds pictures of this man fully nude in his mirror, but not the kind of like pictures that you would be sending, if you know what I mean. These pictures were kind of scary. Like, he takes pictures close up of his eyes, he takes pictures of his hair disheveled, he takes close up pictures of body parts, injuries that he has sustained, and in some of them there are pictures of her completely asleep and him naked in the mirror with her in the background. Nothing to suggest that he done anything to her while she was asleep, just the pictures alone enough to be really scary. And then she goes on to his Google history, which, if you really want to know a person, go on their Google searches. Or maybe don't. Man has been searching how to know if I am insane, how to know if I'm going mad, how to know if the devil is inside me. This man has Googled exorcisms. This man has Googled how to perform an exorcism on your girlfriend. He has Googled demons in my house. Can a demon make me unalive myself? How to get a demon out of my girlfriend. Is my girlfriend the devil? And it becomes clear to her that this man is planning to do an exorcism on her. Okay, here's the kicker. She did not tell one member of her family or her friends that she was planning to go and visit a man that she had met once a year ago in a place in the world that was not connected to anywhere else. She has no car. Nobody's going to hear her scream. If this man does anything to her, she's just stuck there in the middle of nowhere. Need I remind you, this man has gone out to get supplies. What's he getting? Tarp? She decides that she needs to tell him that her nan is very sick and that she needs to leave early, and she does exactly that, and he takes it well, and he actually starts to help her to plan to get home. And I guess her wanting to leave kind of sends a message to this guy, and he starts sleeping on the sofa and letting her have the bedroom, which is great because it means she can lock herself in. So they set the plan in motion that she's going to be leaving in 2 days. That was the earliest that she could possibly get out of that place, and so she decides to just keep her head down and have minimal interactions with this guy who she's living with. So every day when he would leave and he would go and get more supplies, or he would go wherever he went, she would just stay in the house alone. She would spend her days trying to read, but she couldn't, because the whole time she had been there, since like the second day, she was getting migraines, like the most intense migraines she had ever had. But there was no paracetamols, and there wasn't even anywhere to buy them. And she had started to express how bad her headaches were because she could barely lift her head off of the pillow. But one day he comes home and he says, I feel like you need a doctor, like you don't look great. And even though she insists that she doesn't want any help, this guy is very insistent, and he seems to really want her to go and see his doctor. And she starts to feel really paranoid that maybe all these people like worship the devil, and maybe she's there as a human sacrifice. And then she starts having these really bizarre dreams. She starts to see her mum's face at the window, knocking, trying to come in. She's like hallucinating. She hears babies cry. She hears footsteps outside the door. She hears like growling outside her door and scratching outside her door. And she actually gets so paranoid that she starts to scribble notes on things and hide them around the house, so that if he does anything to her, hopefully somebody somewhere will find those notes and know that she was there and call her mum. The last day they're supposed to leave, and she says, I'll call a cab, and he's like, there are no cabs, get in my car. She's like, absolutely not, I'm not getting in your car. And he's like, you don't have a choice, like you have to. She's just refusing. So in the end he's like, what the hell is wrong with you? Like, what has gotten into you? I'm very confused by your behaviour. And she's like, I'm confused by yours. I know what you're trying to do to me. You're trying to kill me. And then she locks him out of his own house, and she starts to put all the furniture against the door. And eventually her parents back in England, they get a call from hospital. Her daughter's been taken in there because she's had a psychotic break, but she hadn't. Turns out there was a gas leak in that house. There was so much more, but I just literally can't fit it in. So on the day that this girl is supposed to leave and the guy is like, you need to get in my car, obviously there is no other form of transportation on that island, that there are no cabs, and she is fully aware of this, but for whatever reason now, in the state of mind that she's in, she fully believes that there are cabs and that he is lying to her to try and get her into his car so that he can take her to become like a human sacrifice. I would assume at this point he is very worried about like what this girl is going to say that he's done to her, etc. And so he calls his uncle, and his uncle comes, and they end up having to get like, I don't know if it's like police or like security that they have on the island. They have to end up getting her out, and that's when they take her to the nearest hospital. Her family back home, who have no idea that she is in Scotland on this little island, get a phone call to say that their daughter is in some sort of episode. She has no history of mental illness, and so they run every sort of test, but she doesn't have a temperature, she has no infection, and so they really have no idea what has happened, but they know that it's probably linked to these migraines, which she has never suffered with before. Before she arrived at this house, this like really, really old house, and by the way, I did reread the email and I realised that it doesn't say that it was 500 years old, so I don't actually know where I got that from. I think I just made that part up. Sorry about that. Unbeknownst to her, this house that she was arriving at had some questionable past, like in the recent history of it. There have been several people that just walked out, didn't want to work on it. It's not like a modern day house where you would have like a hallway and then rooms coming off of a hallway. To get to certain rooms, you had to walk through other rooms. It was like a higgledy-piggledy kind of layout. So he decides, the guy doing work on it, that he's going to start at the back room, so that he doesn't have to traipse like workers' dirt in and out of the house as each room is finished. He starts work on that back room, furthest point from the front door that you can get to. It has a tiny window that a child couldn't fit out, which again is important. It becomes the master bedroom. That's going to become the room where the couple stay, where most of like the weird stuff happens. And when he first starts work on that house, he experiences several worrying things that make him doubt his own sanity. For instance, he experiences losing his tools. Like he would wake up and tools that he knows that he had out for the next day would be gone. He couldn't find them anywhere, and it starts to make him think that maybe somebody from the island was coming in and taking certain tools, and he actually blames another guy that lives on the island and was like born and raised there, and his uncle is basically like, no, he would never do that. The other thing that he experiences is like very scary dreams about certain worship, pretty much everything that I mentioned in the first video. He has dreams of like being outside naked, but when he would wake up in the morning, his feet were like clean, so he didn't think that it had actually happened. But the dreams were very vivid, and he would also have like certain marks on his body that he couldn't remember how they had happened. Certain jobs that he had in his mind to complete the next day, like say for instance laying a certain bit of floor, cutting a certain bit of wood, he would wake up and that job would be done, but it would be done to such a bad standard that it was like wasting materials, and he just couldn't work out who would be doing it. And this is when he starts to question like maybe the house is haunted. And he starts to question if maybe he is having some sort of mental breakdown. He's spending a lot of hours on his own in a house, he's not having human interaction, and he starts to question if maybe that's what's happening. And he reads online that sometimes if you are in some sort of episode, your pupils can dilate, and so he starts to take pictures of his eyes close up. But again, when he wakes up in the morning, he doesn't remember taking these certain pictures, doesn't remember like certain Google searches that he made, but he would wake up and he would see them on his iPad. When he finishes work on that particular room and he starts to move his way through the house towards the front door, those issues, those symptoms that he's been having, they get less and less, and so he starts to write it down to maybe that was his first few weeks and he's slowly adjusting to this new way of life. And I guess at some point this girl gets back in contact with him and he decides that actually I feel quite lonely, I'd quite like to see her again, and he invites her over. This is where things start to go downhill. So there is one room in the whole of the house that is finished to a higher standard than the others, that's going to be the most livable, the most comfortable for having a lady stay, and that is the bedroom at the far side, because remember that was the bedroom that he had started on. up until this point, he has been staying in the first room of the house. So as you came in the door, essentially it's the living room. Obviously, where he's going to be having her stay, he decides to utilise that bedroom, the one that's most finished. So when she arrives, they put all of their stuff in that room, and the first few days are absolutely fine. However, one of the nights, he feels like he can hear somebody walking through the house. And in his mind, he doesn't want to look like he is worried about an intruder or this strange guy that he had assumed had been taking his tools and finishing these jobs to like bad standards. He's assuming that he's back, and he doesn't want to look scared or worried or anything like that. He's trying to impress this girl, and so he starts to lock the bedroom door, which he had never done before. And remember, there is one small window in that room, so essentially with there being a gas leak, they are stopping any ventilation from coming in and out of that room. A few nights into her stay, so a few nights after having these doors closed, she wakes up in a panic and she starts to question where she is. She doesn't know who he is, and she starts to become aggressive, and he is completely petrified, doesn't understand this behaviour, doesn't know if she has any history of mental illness, doesn't even know if she's sleepwalking. He's just very, very confused. Anyway, she jumps up and says that she's being held prisoner, that she wants to leave, and he's like, okay, you can leave. He's scared. He doesn't even have his phone in the room with him to like record what's happening so that he can prove that he didn't do anything to her. And she goes to the door and she tries to get out, but the door is locked. She cannot open it, and so he tries to help her, and at this point she starts hitting him from behind, and she even bites him. So that is where the bite mark came from. And then, casual as anything, she seems to snap out of it and goes and gets back in bed and falls back to sleep. At this point, he is still petrified. He can't believe what has just happened. He can't believe that she's just gone back to bed as if nothing's happened. And so he's still trying to get the door open, and it is jammed. He opens a window and tries to get out of the window, but remember, the window is tiny. Like, in his right mind, he would know that he couldn't fit out of that window, but that just goes to show that he was not in his right mind. Like, this was also affecting him. And this is where in her story she thinks that he's sleepwalking, and she puts him back in bed. And then the next morning she questions him on the bruises on his back, and he can't work out if she genuinely can't remember or if this girl is a little bit mentally unstable and knows what she's done and is now trying to make a joke out of the fact that she's bit him. When he just wants to put the entire thing to bed. Like, he wants this girl to leave, but he doesn't want to make her angry, because now he's questioning, like, if she is she all there. And so when he says that he's going out to do a job and she says that she doesn't want to come, he feels relieved, and he tells his uncle what's gone on. And then he comes home and she seems very unwell, like vomiting, headache, looks pretty bad, in pretty bad shape. And he starts to wonder if maybe this episode is linked to some sort of virus, and he tries to get her to a doctor. She will not go, and because of everything that's already gone on, he doesn't want to touch her, he doesn't want to pick her up, anything like that. And he makes sure that he tells his uncle, and he also records certain incidents as like evidence. And then that brings us to the last day, where she has like a complete meltdown, and they end up having to physically get her out of the house, and they take her to the hospital. He then opens up to his uncle about how he thinks that the house might have something to do with it, and how he thinks that the house is haunted. And at that point, his uncle starts to put two and two together. That is when they realise that the levels in the house are ridiculously high, and if the two had stayed there for another night with the door shut, it could have ended in a serious tragedy. At which point, I guess that he lets her know. Also, really quick disclaimer, I have only spoken to the girl in this story. I don't know the guy. I have never spoken to him. So although I've just told you everything from his perspective, I don't know him. If this is your story, I hope I got everything correct.
This weekend I got very drunk and told my boyfriend's friend's wife that he's cheating on her. I regret this a lot and created a big mess for everyone involved. I'm looking for any advice on how to potentially try to salvage these relationships. My boyfriend and I have been together for about a year and a half, and he recently bought a ring, but he hasn't proposed. I think that might now be out of the window because of this weekend I got very drunk and stupidly and carelessly, and I cannot believe I did this, said to the friend's wife that the friend isn't faithful to her. This man does cheat on his wife constantly, as does his other friend who was there with us that night, with his pregnant wife. I have a lot of issues surrounding all of this, and I've talked to my boyfriend about how much it bothers me a ton, and he basically has said that these are long-term friends and their actions aren't his responsibility or his fault. I do really trust my boyfriend and love him so much, but I have serious trauma about married men being unfaithful because my boyfriend prior to this was secretly married, and it really messed me up. I've projected that resentment and anxiety onto his friends, and I felt it inside but kept it in. Up until Saturday, when I made the comment to his wife while wasted. It caused a fight between them. My boyfriend and I went home, and I texted the wife the next day to apologize, and also said that I was projecting things when I told her about the cheating. My boyfriend asked me to cover it up, and I did, because I wanted to try to somehow preserve the relationship between my boyfriend and I, and not jeopardize a friend's marriage, even though it gutted me to do so on a lot of levels. I know my feelings of anger about the cheating friends are valid, but it absolutely wasn't my place to say anything. I'm looking into therapy to handle my anger on infidelity, and I'm considering seeking treatment for alcohol too, because I think I've been using that to cope the painful feelings I still have that are left over from my last relationship. But I'm freaking out because now I've created this giant mess, both for my boyfriend, his friend, wife, and for the relationship between my boyfriend and I. I damaged his trust a ton, and I know I look like a liar and a manipulator,